Alright, howdy folks, and welcome to this video in which we will discuss the first Men of War II dev block. This actually has just been uploaded on the 4th of August and gives a little bit of extra insight as to what we can expect from the game, its potential release date, some of the game modes, and more. If you want to check out the Men of War II store Steam page, I'll have it linked down in the description. Initially, they actually go over the Men of War timeline, and this isn't really interesting for Men of War II per se. I do want to use this time to touch on something that has come up quite a lot lately. And this is something I see everywhere. The Steam forums, YouTube comments, whether it's my videos or other people's videos, even on Twitter. People keep asking why there is already going to be a new Men of War game after Gates of Hell has basically just released last year. I'll try to put this to rest once and for all. The developer of Gates of Hell and the publisher for Gates of Hell are totally different from the developer and publisher for Men of War II. Now, Bestway, the developer of Men of War II, actually hasn't worked on a Men of War game since 2009, or technically maybe a little bit more recent on Men of War II Arena, if you count that. Though Men of War II Arena has actually been cancelled, and it looks a lot of the work they did for Arena has actually been put to use here for MoW II, basing it off the screenshots. So with that Men of War history lesson out of the way, and hopefully teaching you something about the developers behind Gates of Hell and Men of War II, now we're going to talk about what will be included in some of the single-player campaigns. They talk about historically accurate campaigns on the eastern and western fronts of World War II. As per their Steam store page, there will actually only be two campaigns, one for the Western Allies and one for the Soviets. Now, whether a German campaign will be added later for free, or maybe as paid DLC, or there just won't ever be a German campaign, kind of remains to be seen. There will also be one-off missions. Now, some of this information was already known through their Steam store page, but what they say here about dynamic campaigns is definitely interesting. Apparently, two big dynamic campaigns will initially be added based on historical scenarios, and I could see them adding more dynamic campaigns probably as DLC down the line. In these campaigns, you will lead a division as part of a specific operation. Improving and upgrading your division will actually be a big part of these dynamic campaigns. I have a feeling though that these campaigns might only be playable as the Soviets and the Allies, and that kind of leaves us with no campaign playable as the Germans. It's kind of hard to tell what exactly this dynamic campaign could be like. It could be something like we've seen in Call to Arms and Gates of Hell with their Conquest feature, but then with some added Men of War II Arena features. In Men of War Arena, you'd upgrade divisions and take them into PvP combat, and you'd slowly upgrade your tanks, infantry, and artillery to be better equipped. For example, to make T-34-76s become T-34-85. Now, apparently, every single player mission in Men of War II will be playable in co-op with up to 5 players, which actually includes these dynamic campaigns. A big change from other Men of War or even Call to Arms games so far seems to be the reinforcement system, and it sounds like you're going to be treating co-op as multiplayer, at least when it comes to calling in reinforcements. Now, while playing co-op in any of the previous games, the MP or manpower points would be shared between everyone, and calling in a squad of 10 men would deduct points from everyone, and then also this squad of 10 men would be divided amongst all the players. So if you're playing with 5 people, this squad of 10 men meant every player got 2 soldiers. Now here they specifically mentioned personal reinforcements, implying that instead each player in co-op gets their own pool of manpower, and they'll receive all the units they call in. I'm hoping that sharing or gifting units in a battle to other players will still be possible. It's such a big part of Men of War to me to say, hey, here's my tank, go crazy with it, don't lose it. But it sounds like you control what you call in, and your friends will control what they call in. And this kind of ties in to their next point, in which each player will play as their own division, sort of like in War and Conflict with a specialization for each player. One player can play as infantry, one as armor, and one as artillery/support, with each mission adapting to the number of players in the game. This sounds like it could be very interesting, though I hope they look at how War and Conflict handled this, with the best units like the heavy attack helicopters, special infantry forces, heavy tanks, and heavy artillery were limited to these specific doctrines. However, even an artillery player could technically go ahead and buy a medium tank, just at a higher price than the armor player would be able to. This way you aren't necessarily super pigeonholed into just one role, and you aren't limited to just doing purely artillery. So I'm making a huge assumption here, but I don't think it's a crazy one. They say players will be able to participate in huge operations like Bagration and the Normandy landings, and this kind of coincides with the fact they say there will only be 2 dynamic campaigns. Are Normandy and Bagration the 2 dynamic campaigns? Now, can we play them from both sides, or can we play them just from the Soviet/Allied side like their regular campaigns? Again, I'm really hoping we see something German related down the line, if not at launch. But again, that'll most likely end up being paid if they do it. They say at release there'll be 3 factions, as I mentioned, the Allies, the Soviets, and the Germans, though it's interesting to imagine they would add more factions such as the British or the Japanese. It's been relatively successful for Gates of Hell with their Talvisota Finnish DLC. Now, these 3 factions at launch will have over 300 vehicles between them, with fighter and bomber planes mentioned specifically, as well as the intent to add more vehicles down the line. Now, I'm not sure who cares about the music in Men of War games. I personally really don't. I only turned it on recently in Gates of Hell after I realized they have more than one soundtrack. I just remember playing a ton of Men of War Assault Squad 1 and 2, and they only had one song on repeat, and I still can dream that song to this day. Best Way is actually headquartered in Ukraine, which, as you most likely know, is in the middle of a very active conflict right now. The developers say the game is still supposed to release this year, with more information regarding the release coming hopefully soon. Then they mention the throwable chicken meme. It's a good one. I've done it before. It's kind of funny to start throwing chickens around and actually killing enemies with it. But I do wonder who decided to answer specifically these questions or where they came from. It would be cool to see their future dev blogs take questions from, for example, YouTube comments underneath these videos and try to answer the ones that they can answer. I do want to talk about something that kind of irks me, and I know they're probably just trying to make their screenshots and videos look good for marketing reasons, and I know I'm not alone when I say this, but when I see Men of War in the title of a game, I expect some sort of realism. Now, I'm not going to say this game is going to be anything like Gates of Hell, which has quite big ranges and really a focus on realism. All the footage and screenshots we've seen so far from Men of War II has shown tanks engaging at really close distances. Honestly, ranges that would make Company of Heroes blush with shame. I saw a lot of comments on my original Men of War II video where I did a deep dive on what was known at the time, asking if the game was going to be realistic or arcade, with people concluding that the ranges were so short it has to be an arcade game like Company of Heroes. I hope to see some new screenshots or even footage which just shows some longer range engagements, as that's what I'm definitely used to seeing in the Men of War franchise, and I fully believe that's still what Men of War 2 will deliver. It's just not what they've shown so far, which has really confused a lot of people, especially people new to the Men of War franchise who think this is just some Company of Heroes style game. With that said, we've taken a look at this devlog, which gave us some interesting insight in mostly the dynamic campaigns and upgradable division system. For now, this is all we know, but I look forward to future devlogs as well as information regarding the game's release date. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.